It's that time of year again. The warmer weather is here, and which means we're seeing more motorcycles on the road, which makes it also a great time to talk about motorcycles, how they're impacted by Michigan's auto no-fault laws. This can be a complicated topic, so today we're going to focus on scenarios where someone is injured. As your personal injury firm has decades of experience helping those individuals, that would be the Sinas Law Firm. And today we welcome Grand Rapids car accident lawyer Tom Sinas from that firm to tell us more. Tom, thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me back.
Absolutely. Injured motorcyclists receiving auto no-fault benefits. When can that happen? As we mentioned, it's pretty complicated.
It is complicated, and the question itself sort of proves the complication. On the one hand, you're talking about an injured motorcyclist, and then you're asking about auto no-fault benefits. Of course, a motorcycle is not what we call a motor vehicle. It's not an automobile. So how does this work? Well, when a motorcyclist is involved in an incident with a motor vehicle, think car, that is the event that triggers the motorcyclist's ability to claim auto no-fault benefits. Think of it like this. If the motorcyclist is involved in a crash where maybe they run off the road and hit a tree, or maybe they collide with another motorcyclist, in those scenarios, there are no auto no-fault benefits because you do not have what the law requires, the involvement of a motor vehicle. Okay, well, what's the more common example, perhaps? Of course, sadly, motorcyclists being involved with a crash with a car. Remember, they do not actually have to crash into a car, but there has to be some involvement with a motor vehicle. Most commonly, of course, is a crash. But any type of involvement with a motor vehicle that results in an injury to the motorcyclist allows the motorcyclist to claim auto no-fault benefits. And by the way, this concept applies to bicyclists and pedestrians. The standard here for auto no-fault benefits is involvement of a motor vehicle, and that's the same, of course, for motorcyclists.
Okay, so obviously there are some fine lines, some fine print here that people should know about. You're talking about different ways of receiving or being disqualified from receiving benefits. Can motorcyclists be disqualified?
They can, yes. Everyone can face disqualification for different circumstances, but there is a specific provision that applies to motorcyclists. Motorcyclists are not required to have auto no-fault coverage because, of course, they're not driving an automobile, but they are required to have liability insurance. What is that? That's insurance that would provide some type of financial coverage to them if they hurt someone else. That's a requirement of Michigan law. What does that have to do with auto no-fault? Well, our law says that if a motorcyclist doesn't have the required insurance on their motorcycle, think liability insurance, then the motorcyclist is disqualified from no-fault benefits. So think you have a motorcycle, you have a car, they crash into each other, that triggers involvement of a motor vehicle, entitles the motorcyclist to no-fault benefits. However, if that motorcyclist didn't have liability insurance, then regardless of the fact that they are entitled to the benefits, they become disqualified.
That is some key vital information right there for motorcyclists to know. That could cost them a lot of money. We previously discussed the rules for motor vehicles and who pays what benefits after a crash. So those rules regarding motorcycles are a bit different.
They're very different and confusingly so for motorcyclists. I think probably it's true that most motorcyclists probably have a car. And if they have a car, they insure the car and they provide auto no-fault benefits. So people intuitively think that the same thing that applies to motorists should apply to motorcycles. What do I mean? Well, if you and I are involved in a car crash, you're driving and I'm driving, and we're both hurt, you're going to go to your own insurance company, I'm going to go to my insurance company for our no-fault benefits. But that is not the case with motorcyclists. Motorcyclists first go to the insurance on the involved motor vehicle. What does that mean? Take your classic example, motorcycle, car, crash, motorcyclist is injured. That injured motorcyclist will look first for their no-fault benefits to the insurance company of the car that struck them. Now, if that car doesn't have auto no-fault coverage, or if it's limited, then the motorcyclist will need to look further. But the first place they go is the insurance company on the car that struck them. And that makes motorcycle claims for no-fault benefits different than if you have two cars colliding.
Another fantastic example of how the laws differ and how motorcyclists should know those differences. I'm assuming someone who was in the crash or somebody who maybe even listened to this might be thinking, boy, that's the last thing I'm thinking about. I was just injured in a crash. You know all this stuff. Are there consultations that people can just pick up the phone and call you and get their questions answered?
Absolutely. Our goal here is to make this process of engaging with a lawyer as least intimidating as possible. The people who call us have usually been through maybe the worst thing in their life, and our goal is to give them some information so they can understand some of their legal rights. So the consultation is free. They don't have to pay us for that. And our hope will be to let them know, hey, look, this is what your legal rights are. This is what they are not, for example. And so people can make a better decision about what they want to do. People should make this decision carefully. This is not something to feel rushed by. A lawyer should never make you feel rushed. The process is really important. It's important to understand, and it's important to make a good decision. And so, yes, we offer that service for free.
And thankfully, you do. Sinas Law Firm right there on Cherry Street with that free consultation. Don't feel rushed. And, you know, you don't know what you don't know. So if you have questions,